Well, I've inadvertently departed from what I thought was, and think is, the safest track, which is that God is our Heavenly Father, therefore we're in His family. Now, a good family does not send their kids to school. Good family brings up their kids because they've been entrusted with their own kids, and they are more in harmony with their children than anyone else is likely to be, especially that are doing it for a living. And in fact, schools can be abominable places of lack of care and protection and concern and so on. Whereas, ideally, in the perfect family, the parents are most well purposed towards their children. And of course we trade ability at school for love and care at home. And that may be the fundamental disaster of our society. It may be what supports the present structure of society very ably, but a structure that does not support its citizens as well as we would hope and want. So, let me recast it. Life is not a classroom experience. We can learn much from the analogy, but the ideal is not a classroom experience, and God does the ideal. Life is an ideal home experience, which perhaps we have rather less, many of us at least, have much less experience of. So the analogy is less effective, except to someone, say, like me, that felt I had a really loving parent and spent a great deal of time in oneness with each other. As we understood it, Mum and I would love to have been homeschooled. That would have been so wonderful from my perspective. It wasn't an option in those days, not a conceivable option either. Whereas in New Zealand, turn of the 21st century, it is an option, and wonderful it is. I mean, I'm on the board of a Rudolf Steiner school, and that's to me the best compromise I can settle for, given I have a broken family and my wife left, and therefore I don't get ARIA all the time. My little girl of 8 now, I get 5 days and nights in a fortnight. And that would hardly be sufficient to reliably run homeschooling. Otherwise, for her sake, I suspect I would. Although my younger son, who I homeschooled to the age of 9.5, felt that homeschooling was, well, a disservice in some ways, in that you needed to battle with the world to cope with it. I'm not sure about his conclusion, because I look at the way he's coped with it, and it's a secular life of not the ideal living practices, but ones that dissipate the life force and energy, and not conducive to directly moving towards life eternal at all, of course. He's very secular. Most good and useful in many ways, but let's get back to the topic. The ideal, and it's the ideal that God practices, is in our comprehension actually not the school, but homeschool. I want to be taught of my heavenly parents, mum and dad, don't I? What else would I risk? And therefore that's how we should actually understand his care of us. It is not in the perfect school, but in the perfect family. And with family structures being eroded by 20th and 21st century culture, that may be less helpful analogy than that life is actually a godly school. It might be easier to see it in that way. But nearer the reality would be that life is a perfect family, where we experience striving with our siblings, of course, and cooperating with them. We experience growing up with them. What the Christianity used to say is wheat and tares together sown, except that was extremely judgmental as to what the future was going to be. A lot of weeds around the place that are going to be weeded up and chucked on the heap. Yeah, okay, so we all get it wrong, don't we? But we can all get it wrong. But if I think on the understanding of life as the perfect family, as God has it, parents are not always involved in every detail of our lives. They let us experiment, interact, play. For sure, they make sure that serious dangers are avoided. Rush to the rescue and remove certain obstacles that would be troublesome. We don't leave sharp knives around and so on and so forth. When he picks up the hammer to play, well, we might just take it away, and so forth. Well, yes. Thank you, Heavenly Father. But homeschooling, so to speak, families, does require the existence of family. If you're a parent on your own, then the child hasn't got more than one point to get his bearings on and reference. If there's more than one adult around, two good parents that ideally love each other and cooperate, then he can start to get a fix on who he is, where he is. You need 2 points to give the third a reference and locate it. You can't just locate it from 1 point. You can locate where you are from 2. And it needs to be a family too, in that there are other children that are learning. I mean, the only child is the glory as of an only begotten son. Yes, it's given much glory, but it could be pretty weird. He hasn't got used to an awful lot of lessons that he's going to need as regards coping with his peers in the world that he may be coping with as an adult. So, I'm not sure about homeschooling when it's basically going to be done by one parent, the other one's absent, and there's no other children also being taught. In other words, the environment might just be too narrow, too lacking in variety and experience. Very loving and kind, but well, it will work if the parent has the capability of God, of course. That's a bit different, isn't it? If you like, one without faults and beautifully motivated and able. Okay. Have to think about that. Well, he has the resources and capability to have many other reference points, all sorts of adults that he puts in your life, and other children as well. In other words, other people in the world who are similarly being brought up by him. That the world is indeed not the perfect school, but the perfect family. And if you like, the perfect school is the perfect family, or the perfect family, the perfect school. That the perfection of either comes up with the same identity. That's an interesting solution, isn't it? Thank you, Heavenly Father. Let's consider for a moment, my children, they're three children by three different wives. In series, I might point out, not in parallel. And they recognise their brothers and sister, two boys and a girl. So they have brothers, but of course they weren't really brought up with each other because the age gap was just too great. And I'm wondering if a different aspect, which is that in polygamous societies where the rich man has many wives, Solomon, so to speak, or Abraham, 4 wives, the wives have a communion with each other. There may be strife and envy between them, of course, but competition. But there might not be. In some sense, they may specialize in what they contribute to the family. One just loves looking after children and one doesn't. She's, a great lover or something, and the children too are rather more varied now. They may respond more to particular mums, or even, and not rather necessarily their own mum, but one of the other wives, who really is gifted in caring for children, perhaps. Certainly a community, a secular community on your that used to send their children to our school in Suffolk. They're incredibly well-balanced children. They're absolute asset in the school. And interestingly, there was always an adult back home in the commune that would give them an ear. There's always, quotes, auntie, one of the other adults who perhaps wouldn't have had children, but longed to be a fine parent or grandparent or auntie, and could do it in this context, and was always there for them and listening to them and helping them and guiding them. And you can imagine in a Christian community praying for them, of course, and so on. We were, as secular people, the secular around me were impressed at just how well balanced these children were that came from the commune. Yes. Interesting, we assume our cultural structure, whatever it is the right one. And it may be for our circumstances, our technology, our geographical location even. With its natural resources and climate and so forth. Don't know. Thank you, Heavenly Father.